Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your interest in the scandal that is rapidly enveloping the governor and his administration. I'm House Democratic Leader Tim Greimel, and I'm joined today by State Representative Brandon Dillon and State Representative Rashida Tlaib. We are unveiling House Democratic reform proposals that include transferring $22 million from the controversial state furniture contract to local school districts throughout our state. They would also place a $1 million cap next budget year on the bloated state office furniture budget. These reforms will end out-of-control spending on state office furniture and, most importantly, put the savings where it belongs, in our state's classrooms. We will hear today from Representatives Dillon and Tlaib, who will outline key elements of our reform package, including establishing new public disclosure requirements and provisions, and adding more accountability aimed at reining in contract and ethical abuses by the Snyder administration and House Republican lawmakers. But first, let me briefly explain what prompted these proposed reforms and why they are necessary. 3 weeks ago, we learned that the Snyder administration and the Snyder controversial Nerd Fund intervened in the midst of the state's fiscal year 2012 budget crisis. The intervention was meant to shield the governor's cousin, George Snyder, and major financial contributor, Haworth, Inc., from what could have been a multi-million-dollar budget cut connected to a state furniture contract. We also discovered that just a year later, after House Republicans helped administration officials kill a Senate budget bill provision to cap furniture purchases at $1 million, the Snyder administration increased a state furniture contract with Haworth, Inc. by more than $22 million to $41 million total. That is more than doubling this furniture contract for Haworth, Inc., a partner of which was the governor's cousin. I will remind you that this doubling of spending on office furniture from the governor's cousin to $41 million came at exactly the same time as a $1 billion cut to the state's per-pupil foundation allowance was occurring, and at exactly the same time as the governor was imposing massive tax increases on everyday residents in the state, including a new retirement tax on our state seniors. So Republicans refused to scale back new state office furniture purchases that benefited the governor's cousin and major Republican campaign contributors, but they proceeded to cut over $1 billion from education funding and from police and fire protection, while raising $1.5 billion in taxes on retirees and middle-class families. That's wrong. It's the wrong priorities for the state of Michigan, and we are going to fight to change that. Today, we will describe the reforms and priorities that we believe will help restore the public's confidence in state contracting and spending. And here to discuss the bills is Representative Brandon Dillon. Brandon?
Thank you. Thank you, Leader Greimel. Governor Snyder told Michigan's struggling parents, seniors, and communities that while they needed to do some heavy lifting to pay for his budget priorities, that there'd be shared sacrifice, and that we must have a we, not me mentality. But instead of shared sacrifice, Michigan's middle-class families did all the lifting, while the governor's family and political friends were protected. And they unloaded more new, unneeded office furniture onto the taxpayers of this state. No one continues bearing the brunt of the governor's misplaced priorities than parents and their children. When the Snyder administration and House Republicans gave the state of Michigan $41 million in new office furniture while cutting more than $1 billion from our schools, that is a classic example of them having their priorities all wrong. Think about that for a moment. At the same time that the governor and House Republicans were putting our children's futures and our state's future at risk, they were making certain that massive spending on state office furniture would continue. And why did they do that? Because it helped the Snyder family and their corporate friends. And continue it did, but with an outrageous increase in spending of more than $22 million. Today, we propose to undo these politically motivated expenditures by the governor for his family member and his donors, and instead put those dollars into our classroom where they always belonged. We're proposing today to amend the 2015 budget to add $22 million from the general fund to the school aid fund. That reflects the difference between the 2011 Haworth contract and its current authorized level of $41 million. We also propose amending the state's 2015 budget to include a $1 million limit on the purchase of office furniture by the state. This legislation will ensure that our kids' education, not brand new office furniture from the governor's cousin, will be our top priority. And now I'd like to pass it on to Representative Rashida Tlaib. Rashida?
Thank you, Representative Dillon. What I'm going to share with you all today are reform proposals that will restore fairness and integrity to our state contracting system and clean up our lobbying laws. Secret slush funds, questionable lobbying, and backdoor deals should not be the Michigan way of doing the public's business. Unfortunately, that is exactly what has been going on and revealed in recent days. Disclosures of emails obtained under the Freedom of Information Act have shown that Governor Snyder's Nerd Fund was used to secretly lobby to protect a major Snyder campaign donor. And George Snyder, the governor's cousin, from the proposed state budget cuts passed by the Senate for fiscal year 2012 that could have cost them millions of dollars. Emails between Richard Baird and other Snyder administration officials show how they successfully intervened on state contracts to help a Snyder family member and other major Republican contributors. All of this was being done in secret, behind the scenes, maneuvering involving family relationships between state contractor and the governor using the Nerd Fund. Whose corporate funders today are still being kept secret by the governor while employing an agent, Richard Baird, who has operated in the dark whilst lobbying behind the scenes state officials. What we propose today are measures that will end a pattern and a practice of official behavior that is undermining our Michigan values of open, transparent government. They are requiring all high-level state employees, including the governor and his staff, to report their income, assets, liabilities, and any asset changes affecting them or their immediate family members. Michigan's taxpayers deserve to know what, if any, financial conflicts may exist within the highest levels of state government. Secondly, we propose that all state contractors and bidders disclose any family relationships that exist between corporate officers, owners, and directors, as well as senior officials in the executive branch of the state government. Third, we propose amending the Michigan Lobby Registration Act to include language reading: an individual conducting business under the auspices of the executive office of the governor or lieutenant governor. This will require lobbying of those individuals and also subject them to current lobbying limits for public officials, which we all meet in those standards. The disinfectant of transparency that these common sense reforms would create will mean cleaner government and a better, safe government that is more accountable to our taxpayers. We as elected officials are held to a higher standard in individuals, and the executive office should be no different. Finally, Leader Greimel has a few closing remarks. Tim.
Thank you, Rashida. I would just add that on top of the furniture scandal in and of itself, which is egregious enough, we just learned yesterday that the MEDC also awarded a no-bid contract to Haworth and DBI. Again, now we see a true pattern emerging over a long period of time of the governor's administration doing everything they can to benefit the governor's family at the expense of the real budget priorities and the real values of Michigan residents.